Welcome back to the Brahmin Word, and Isaac has arrived, and we are going to, on Thursday, we are going to one of the most infamous passages about Isaac in Genesis chapter 22. But today, we are going to wrap up what seems like a little bit of a side story with Abraham at the end of chapter 21, but I think it picks up well with the birth of Isaac and then the infamous almost sacrifice passage of Isaac. So we will go there. So turn with me to Genesis chapter 21, verses 22 through 34, or the end of chapter 21. So Genesis chapter 21, verse 22. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, God is with you in all that you do. So, first off, it's possible that this Abimelech is maybe from somewhere else. But I think, based on what I have seen from other sources, and then two, how he describes his relationship with Abraham in verse 23, which we'll get to in a second, I think that it's a good chance that the Abimelech scene here is the same as the Abimelech scene in chapter 20 because of how well, even after Abraham tries to pull this kind of stunt with Sarah, where he basically lies about who she is to cover his own self. Basically, I think based on the fact that Abimelech allowed them to stay in his region of influence, I think it's very possible that these are the same people here. So with that being said, it's really, really cool to see that he calls Abraham, God is with you in all that you do. But yet at the same time, he does bring up a little bit about the past that they have. Verse 23. Now therefore swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me, or with my descendants, or with my posterity. But as I have dealt kindly with you, so you will deal with me and with the land where you have sojourned. And Abraham said, I will swear. So there's this treaty slash covenant between these two here that then takes on a different level here in just a second. But I think it's interesting to see how he starts describing Abraham and then how he finishes it. So he starts with saying, look, I know that you are a follower of God. That much is clear. And God is with you in all that you do, according to the end of verse 22. But then you have this callback to the actions taken by Abraham in chapter 20 in verse 23. He says, look, yeah, the whole thing where you dealt falsely with me, I don't want you to do that anymore. And remember how I dealt kindly with you. I didn't have to keep you in the country. I could have kicked you out. And I also gave you possessions as well. And if you remember from chapter 12, where Abraham and Pharaoh, yes, there are possessions that are given to Abraham, but really Pharaoh's just wanting him to get out. Whereas here, Abimelech in chapter 20 allows them to stay in the country. And now, granted, it could be that he's thinking of a financial gain from partnering with Abraham, possibly. But I think he's mainly thinking, well, look, there's something about this guy that he clearly has a God on his side. Now, again, my guess is that Abimelech is not a follower of the Lord. So he's just basically trying to get onto Abraham's good side and Abraham's God's good side. I think that's what's going on here. And that does seem to be the case, but then there is something that comes up between them. So, verse 25. When Abraham reproved, or basically called out, Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized. Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this thing. You did not tell me, and I have not heard of it until today. So there's this well of water that was Abraham's. And Abimelech's servants had seized it. So you could be thinking, okay, is the treaty done? Is the covenant broken because of the actions of these servants? But Abimelech makes it very, very clear, I have no clue what's going on. So my guess is that these servants just went rogue. Basically, these servants did this out of their own volition and out of their own heart. And so Abraham decides to take this as true, and he sets up a covenant between them in verse 27. So Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two men made a covenant. But then he adds to this in verse 28. Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock apart. And Abimelech said to Abraham, what is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs that you have set apart? So I think the setting apart of the ewe lambs, I think that's part of the gift that's mentioned in 27. I don't think it's an extra part of it. I think it's a part of the whole entire gift as a whole to make this covenant between these two. So what is the purpose of setting these apart, though? Verse 30. Abraham said, these 7 ewe lambs you will take from my hand, that this may be a witness for me that I dug this well. Basically, Abraham is showing that, look, I believe that you had nothing to do with this. And so I am willing to show in good faith that I trust your word. So I'm giving this to you as a... as a show of good faith, that I trust that you had nothing to do with this. And then it goes a little bit even further that these two men have come together finally, even after the lies of Abraham in chapter 20, and then this, again, possibly rogue servants of Abimelech that make this mistake in chapter 21. There's still this covenant that comes between these two men. Verse 31, therefore, that place was called Beersheba because there both of them swore an oath. And Beersheba means well of 7, which I think is interesting because of the 7 ewe lambs, right? Or, well, the oath. I think, too, the reason why Abraham picks 7 is to show the completeness, because the number 7 in ancient Near Eastern times, especially in Hebrew circles, meant completion. And so I do believe that is why he picked 7 instead of 8, 9, 10, whatever. I think that's why he picked that number specifically, to show the completion of the covenant between those two. But yeah, so they make this covenant at Beersheba. Verse 32. So they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, rose up and returned to the land of the Philistines. So we get a little bit more information on Abimelech and the fact that he is from the land of the Philistines. Which is really, really fascinating, because the word Philistines, the name Philistines, brings up David and Goliath. And so you know that eventually the Philistines will turn on Israel. But as of right now, the founder of Israel and this king of the land of the Philistines are getting along really, really well, which I find interesting. Verse 33, Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. Why did he plant a tree? I think it is, again, a sign of the covenant between the two men. But I also think it is also setting up a reminder for Abraham and for Abraham's kindred, not just the covenant between Abimelech and Abraham, but I think ultimately the reminder of the goodness and protection that the Lord provides. Because again, it says that at this tamarisk tree in Beersheba, Abraham called on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God, which we have seen before. And part of that calling out is worship, but also a sacrifice too. So it's just another way to remind Abraham of the goodness of the Lord, I think. And then Abraham sojourned many days in the land of the Philistines. And so it's just this fascinating little side story. But you may be thinking, okay, well, what's the point? I mean, uh, it doesn't have anything to do with Isaac, which is the birth of Isaac in chapter 21, verses 1 through 21. And then you have the sacrifice, or the near sacrifice, of Isaac in chapter 22, which we'll look at on Thursday. So, what's the side story even about? Well, I think it's wrapping up chapter 20 for sure. I think it's definitely wrapping up chapter 20. But then, two, I think it's showing the protection that the Lord brings to his children, which of course is seen in the birth of Isaac, because you have the promise of the Lord to give Abraham a child finally come to fruition. Yes, there is Hagar and Ishmael, but the son of promise finally comes at the beginning of chapter 21. But then you see the protection of the Lord for Abraham and Isaac in chapter 22. So I think it's starting to set this precedent of the protective side of the Lord for his children, because here you don't really see God's dialogue, which you see in the first part of 21 and all throughout 22, you don't really see here at the end of 21. And I think it's because he's trying to show that he is the protector of his children, of you and I as sons and daughters of God. I think that's why this side story is, yeah, it may look off on the surface, but I think it definitely it's a cool little middle ground between the promise fulfilled with the birth of Isaac and the protection of the Lord in chapter 22, towards Abraham and Isaac, that we will see on Thursday. Definitely am excited about chapter 22, and so I'll see you on Thursday as we go through the almost sacrifice of Isaac. I'll see you then.